Welcome back to Adobe Lightroom Classic, and this is going to be try number 3 for me because I keep forgetting to hit start on my computer and start the screen recording. So today we're going to take a look at the rest of the options that we haven't gone over inside of the develop module. And so these are all what we call global adjustments. And the first thing that we're going to take a look at is lens correction, and then we're going to take a look at transform. Now, when you're making these adjustments, a lot of times they're very difficult to see what's happening in the image. So in this tutorial, I'm going to make some like wild, crazy adjustments just so you can see what's going on with the image. So let's slide on over here to Adobe Lightroom Classic and take a look at lens correction. All right, so we have this 1A couple right here. And if we slide on over here, we're going to open up lens correction. We're going to close lens blur. Up here in lens correction, we've got profile and manual. We have two different options. I'm going to click on profile, and then I'm going to come over here and put enable profile collections. And what you will see is it's automatically recognized what lens this was shot with, and it's applying the lens corrections dependent on whatever profile it picks. So if I turn this off, you'll see some little adjustments in the kind of distortion and warping of the image and vignetting on the edges. So with lenses, especially with cheaper lenses, they tend to vignette or darken on the edges. And with wide angle lenses, you get parallax or warping of the image. And so lens correction is helping to correct with it. Now, all this stuff helps, but it's almost never going to make it perfect. The way this worked is in this image, we just selected the enable profile corrections. It makes the adjustments for us. If I wanted some of the vignetting back, I could simply just slide this and get it back. So just because it makes it doesn't mean you can't come in here and control the distortion of the vignetting. Distortion, I'm going to show you here in a second when we do the manuals, because it would just be easier to see what in the world it's doing. Now, in some cases with some images, if I click on this image and I click on enable profile corrections, you'll notice it doesn't recognize it. So in this case, the person that uploaded this image didn't save that metadata so that it can't read it, so it has no idea what to do. In that case, that's where you come over here to manual. And so we can make the lens corrections manually. And so even though we used profile, what it was doing is this. It's controlling the distortion of the image. So if I come in here and I slide this, you can see it's kind of warping it either in or out. So it's convex or concave that's making those adjustments. And when I do that, it's also creating this white space. If I just don't do anything further, it's going to save this as part of our image. But we've got this little constraint crop symbol here. If I click on that, it's going to crop in to the image and get rid of that. It's still doing the distortion warp, but that's what it's doing. So we can control that. So this is how we kind of control the distortion or warping of the building. And we also have something called defringe. And so defringe, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to click up here. I'm going to go plus, 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 plus. All right. And we're going to hit reset because I removed it already. We'll do another plus. What defringing is in an image, especially you see this in trees a lot, that are out of focus on the edges, they get these weird colorations in them. And so defringing helps remove some of this weird color that you got on the edges. And so when we zoom in really far on these images, you'll see what I'm doing and then how it's going to be removed. So if you look right here, we've got this like intense blue that's on the shadow side, and on the highlight, we've got this kind of yellowish green side. And if we come over here to the fringe, notice we've got like a purple slider and a green slider. And then this is a range slider. So it's going from blue to kind of this orange color. And here the green hue is going from the reddish color to this kind of cyan color. And we've got these little slider points, and this is picking the range. However, you can just take this color picker and come up here and say, nope, this is the area that I want to remove. So now I've selected that, and we know that's the purplish color. This is the range. It automatically picked because I used the color picker. And then I can slide this, and you can see it removes some of that intense color. I could go to the left and make it even worse. So basically it's just a saturation adjustment, but I'm just sliding that to get rid of it. And then I can come up here and I can pick this color, and this is going to be the one for the green. I can slide this to the right and get rid of some of that fringing in our image. So that's how you use lens correction. The next option here is called transform, but before you use transform, make sure you make the lens correction adjustment first and then use transform. Transform is right here, and we've got a bunch of auto options. So we've got off, auto, full, vertical, level. So in this case, this image doesn't have a lens correction profile. I didn't make any adjustments, but we're going to use it to show you what transform does. So off right now, it's not doing anything. So what we're doing in transform is seeing these convergence lines that are in an angle. So this building wasn't built so that this is wider here and this is narrower here. This is because of the convergence lines and that this is a fixed back camera. In this case, I actually like the kind of pinching in the image, but I'm going to show you if you don't like it, what you can do to fix it. So if we come up here and just hit auto, it's going to go boom, and it's going to try to straighten everything. Now, notice you are losing part of your image when you do this because it's warping it or distorting it, and we're losing areas. Right here, if we put constraint crop on and then we click auto, it's just going to make sure that you don't get any transparent or white areas on the outside of the image. I'll hit off. Guided lets us set guides. So I can left click and drag, and I can make a line saying, hey, I want you to straighten here. And then I want you to straighten this over here and make this line and this line parallel. And it didn't work perfect here, but basically it made this area and this area level. We'll hit off, we'll go to level. This makes more sense here. So on this image, this side is a little bit low compared to this side. So if I hit level, it's automatically going to twist it and make it so the horizon is level in this image. Next option is vertical, and it's just going to try to make everything vertical line up here in the image. Notice we're getting a lot of white space or transparent areas. So you would want to hit constraint crop so it gets rid of that if that's something you didn't like. And the last option is full, where it's really trying to do everything. And yes, we've lost almost the whole left side of this image, and we have a little bit of transparency up here. But that's how transform works. If you forget to use any of these options and you do work inside of Adobe Photoshop, Adobe Photoshop has the exact same thing inside of it. So you can do these options inside of the program there. And you can manually transform and distort inside of Photoshop. So you actually do have a little bit more control. All right, our next option is lens blur. And lens blur came into Lightroom maybe about 3 years ago. And I love lens blur. This is one of my favorite things that Adobe has added to the program. And the reason it's so cool is because traditionally, if you wanted to blur something in the background, you would go into Photoshop, select that area, and blur it. And it would blur everything evenly. So you lose that sense of depth of field in the image, where the items in the back are going to be very blurry, and the items towards the front or near the subject are going to have less blur in it. So what lens blur does is it's sort of a very basic or simple depth map in the image. And what that means is it's going to make a selection of your image. In this case, we're going to identify the subject. And so the areas that are really far are going to get more blur, and the items that are out of focus still, but closer to the subject, are going to get less blur. So let's take a look. So if we come over here and we click apply on lens blur, it's got to analyze the image first because it's creating what we call a depth map. And so we can come over here and click visualize depth map, and we can see it. So this yellow area is what's in focus. That's our subject. So right over here, we've got this, and this little icon means you're using the subject to create the depth map. You could also click on this, and I'll click here in the background. So it's going to create the depth map, assuming that the sky now is what's in focus. And then it would blur this area. Now for this to work, we need to be off of visualize depth map, but I'll show you here in a second. But we wanted to use the focus pattern. All right, so this is what's in focus. This area is going to get more blur. And as we move forward in the different colors, they're going to add less and less blur to the image. So it's creating what we call a depth map. So right here is our focus range, and we can control this. Notice it's got some little ears on here. We can click those ears and drag. So I'm refining the area that's in focus. So it's a smaller area. And this can be in front of or behind the subject that creates the depth blur. If I wanted to have this in a new area, I could just manually slide it. So now it's on the lions. So in this case, I switched the focus range to the lion. So the lion wouldn't get any blur, but this would get blur and she would get blur. So we're controlling that. So in this case, I'm just going to do uncheck visualize depth map. We'll slide it over here, or I could just hit the subject and it'll automatically make that selection. So you can see that we're getting some blur in the background, but on our subject, we can click on this. Then we can come over here to where the line is. I can click, I can say, hey, this is my focus point now. And now you can see we're getting blur on our subject, but not on the lion. And we're getting some blur back here. In this case, we don't want that. We just want our subject. So we're going to click right there. Right here, we have a slider for the amount of blur. So if we want to add blur, I go to the right. If I want less blur, I go to the left. The last option that we have inside of this lens blur is what we call bokeh. And so we can control bokeh in our image if we have it. In this case, we don't have any. So I'm going to overlay an image and I'm going to show you me adjusting the bokeh in the image and give you a sense of what in the world the bokeh is. Basically, we can add more bokeh to the image and we can control it. So we want the bokeh to be a perfect circle? Do we want it to be an octagon, a cat's eye? We have all those different options. So here is the different options of what they look like. So we can do a circle, we can do a bubble, we can do a vintage 5-blade lens, we can do a donut, and this is cat's eye. So this allows us to adjust the strength of these, and boost is how much bokeh are we getting added to the image there. We do have a refinement brush, and that can work on both the focused area or the blur area. So if I wanted to remove or add, in this case, I'm just going to remove the blur. I'll click on blur. I can come in here and make this adjustment, and I could paint the blur out of this area just by saying, hey, yeah, I want it, but not in that location. So that is the refinement brush. You can add or subtract this depth blur anywhere in your image. The next option here is effects. And this is super easy. We can add vignetting to our image that we took away in lens correction, or we can make it brighter if you wanted to make it brighter. And so you have the options of using highlight, color, or paint overlays. I usually just use mine on highlight. You can control the midpoint, and let me just make it dark so you can see. So we can control where that is, the midpoint of it, the roundness, so we can make it more square, more round. We can control the softness of the feather. We can give it a hard edge or a soft edge, and we can control the highlights of that vignette. The next option is grain. So we can simply add grain or noise to our image. And so I'm just increasing this so we get more or less grain. We can control the size of the grain and the roughness of the grain. Really, really simple. That is lens effect. Now, the last option that we have here is what's called calibration. And truthfully, I don't use calibration inside of Lightroom because I can use selective color inside of Photoshop and it does the same thing, but a whole lot better. What calibration is just another way to color correct your image. So if you want to adjust the shadow area tint, so make it more magenta or green, remember this is the shadow area, you can slide this slider. If you want to adjust the primary reds, greens, or blues, you have the option to adjust the hue or the saturation. Notice there isn't a lightness adjustment like there was inside of the color mixer. But that is what calibration does. And that is it for the rest of the adjustments inside of Adobe Lightroom Classic. If you found this video helpful and could give us a thumbs up, that would be great. If you have any comments or questions, you can leave those below. Have a wonderful day and don't forget to subscribe.